back of the rim. Got it! Oh, the slam! Oh, using Curry way downtown. Oh, what a shot from Curry!
And at long last, we have reached the conclusion of what has been a pretty incredible NBA season by any standard. We have the NBA Finals featuring the winner of the Western Conference and Eastern Conference, the Denver Nuggets and the Miami Heat, and NBA Finals that I don't think anybody had on their list coming into this season. I do want to take a moment to recap both series and only spend a little bit of time on the Western Conference because that happened quite a while ago and it wasn't as interesting. However, we do need to talk about the Heat and Celtics because holy shit. First of all, congratulations Miami Heat. This is one of those series where you just tip your cap. I listed out like 4 or 5 things that the Heat would need to do to win 4 games, and they did them all. From the 3-point line, you're looking at Jimmy Butler, 34%, Caleb Martin, 49%, Gabe Vincent, 51%, Duncan Robinson, 48%, Strus, 34%, Kyle Lowry, 35%, Kevin Love, 55%, Haywood Highsmith, 60%. I don't know if I've ever watched a playoff series where a team came in and I didn't think they were all that talented, but the role players were this damn dependable. Anytime Caleb Martin shot the ball, I just assumed it was going in. Pretty much same thing for Duncan Robinson. Pretty much the same thing for this entire team. I said that they were going to throw out some zone looks because when Philly did that, the Boston Celtics struggled. Erik Spoelstra did not hesitate to hit that button anytime he needed it, including Game 7 when it seemed like the Celtics might start off on a run. He hit that button and they damn near never looked back. The Miami Heat have an extremely impressive zone. It is very aggressive, it is very chaotic, and anytime that they did that, I feel like you could just see the question mark loading above the Boston Celtics head. It's what I was afraid of, and it turned out so much worse than I thought it was going to. Although Bam wound up struggling towards the back end of the series, I need y'all to give him his credit because whether it was zone or not, he was low-key pretty much the reason that the Celtics, that they already loved to shoot threes, but they loved it even more because if they wanted to get a layup, for the most part, they just couldn't. They could not get a clean look at the rim. After a while, Erik Spoelstra just gave up on Kevin Love and Cody Zeller and said, look, Bam, you've got to be the big for this series, and when you're not on the floor, we're just going to play small. That worked out in Game 7. And when you mix that in with the Celtics' 30% three-point shooting for the series, I believe Game 6 was the worst they had shot the entire season. There was just nothing left for them to do. They could not find a reliable way to attack. They allowed the Miami Heat to get away with having guys like Duncan Robinson on the floor because the Heat are so aggressive that they most of the time do not allow you to just play one-on-one with their weaker defenders. And yes, also credit Duncan Robinson. Full disclosure, I have clowned this man before for his contract, and he not only came in this series and scorched from 3, bro was driving to the rim. He had a lob to Bam Adebayo. He was back cutting the living shit out of this Celtics team. Duncan Robinson cuts to the rim were just not on my bingo card whatsoever. Funny enough, I felt like the Celtics hit a lot of the points they needed to win the series as well. They just did it far too late. That thing about Jimmy Butler and who was going to be defending him. First of all, shout out Derek White because he did not do a terrible job, but I also feel like they made him more hesitant as the series drug on versus the beginning of the series. As it went on, I felt like it was more frequent to see bigger defenders like Jason Tatum on him, which surprisingly made him a little bit passive, a little bit more thoughtful about where he was going on the court. But by the time they really got into a groove, they were already down 0-3, and even though they came close winning 4 straight, I really don't think that's ever going to happen. I don't know if a 3-0 lead is ever going to be blown. If it doesn't happen when the home team is able to get Game 7 on their home floor and completely snatch the momentum, I just don't know when that is ever going to be a thing. At the end of the day, the Miami Heat just played way better basketball. One of the final concerns I would talk about that I had with the Celtics was their ability to just devolve into a total 3-point shooting team. And yes, credit to Miami's defense, but also the shot selection was very underwhelming at times for Boston. It really seemed like they were just frustrated with the process and said, look, if we don't bomb them from behind the 3-point line, we just don't really care. Just like in the Philadelphia series, the offense looked like 3 and pray, and sometimes the prayers were answered, sometimes they were not. It's disappointing that the Celtics were this talented of a team, and that's what the offense boiled down to more often than not. Yeah, man, just congratulations to the Miami Heat. That is a hell of a team. They are coached crazy well by Eric Spoelstra, and they deserve every bit of this NBA Finals trip. As for the Boston Celtics, things get really bad now, because if Jaylen Brown does not accept that extension, then he pretty much automatically will be traded in the offseason. I don't know why he would play out the next season if they had no guarantee that they could even keep him and then they could lose him for free. But the double-edged sword to that is if they do keep him, they are going to have 2 Supermax players, which eventually means they won't be able to sign help. And I don't know if I think that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have the ceiling to be 2 superstars on a squad that is basically a skeleton crew and still contend. Not to blame everything on Jaylen Brown, but his handles look extremely suspect sometimes. And have all that money tied up in that, which will pretty much keep you from being an actual championship team. Your guess about what happens to the Celtics going from here, it's really as good as mine. So in the end, this ends up being the 3rd series that I got wrong in predictions this year. I had the Boston Celtics in 6, and that was specifically for the reason that I thought a lot of stupid things were going to happen to them. A lot of stupid things did happen, and they lost to the Miami Heat in 7. They will face the Denver Nuggets, who swept the Los Angeles Lakers. I actually had Denver in 7, so that was a lot quicker than I thought it would be. This recap of that series will be a lot quicker. I think it just boiled down to execution, because if anyone ever does venture to look back at this series, they will see that it was closer than they remembered. It's crazy because Los Angeles was in enough of these games to have won 4 of them. So there were some hair split as I thought they were going to be, and it really came down to the fact that the Nuggets hit everything that they needed to, plus they executed in the 4th quarter. So when I say that, you're looking at a Nuggets squad that put 9 players on the floor throughout the series, and 6 of them averaged double digits. Not only did LA not have any kind of answer for Jamal Murray or Nikola Jokic, but everyone that they needed to hit from behind the 3-point line also hit. Until you get down to Aaron Gordon, the starters all shot above 40% from the 3-point line. Toward the end in the clutch, I can't remember which game, but you saw things like Jamal Murray screening for Nikola Jokic, which is just something that you don't have very many options to do when defending. You just kind of have to live with giving something up and pray. And another places that the hairs got split is that the Lakers were not effectively able to use Jared Vanderbilt or D'Angelo Russell in this series. So you look at Russell, I basically said if he is not scorching on offense, you have no reason to have him out there. He can't affect the game. He did not. He averaged 6 points. He shot 13% from 3, 32% from the field. Obviously, Jared Vanderbilt presents his own challenges, and they had to manage the lineups accordingly. So they really just could not get the advantage they need to get over the top in any of these. One of the first things Bruce Brown said in the series is that they were making a point to attack D'Angelo Russell, and had he been able to shoot even like he did in the last series from 3 in some of these games, they might have came away with a few. But you combine that with LeBron shooting 26% from 3, and that was just enough to really make the difference in how close some of the games ended. Thus, the Denver Nuggets have advanced to their first ever NBA Finals, where they will play the Miami Heat. So the very first thing I think about is how the Heat got an advantage on Boston with that zone, and I look at the Nuggets roster, and I just don't feel like it is going to hit the same whatsoever. You have Horford or Williams on the floor during a Heat zone, they might end up just being a non-factor. They turn into passers. Maybe Horford ends up in a position to get a 3, but he wasn't hitting those anyways. It essentially makes it like a 4-on-5 game at best for Boston. You do that against Denver, how many different options do you have for Jokic to break this? First of all, he can break this up with his passing. Second of all, you can actually put him up at the top of it and use him like a point guard, so you're not really taking anyone off the table. Maybe there's some lineups that the Nuggets put out there where the Heat try to sneak that in and slow them down to keep themselves in the games, but against the Nuggets regular lineups, I don't even know if Spo is going to go to that as often. So if you can't create an advantage there, where else do you do so? Against the Celtics, Bam more or less got away with towards the back half of the series having good defensive games, but pretty subpar to bad offensive ones. Going against Jokic, I think the bad offensive ones are really going to hurt a lot worse. I feel like some of those bad games in Boston were balanced out by the fact that the Celtics couldn't throw the ball into the ocean sometimes from 3. going against the Nuggets, you're gonna have probably better 3-point shooting, and I'm gonna assume very consistent, great offensive games from Jokic. And that's not to underrate the defensive job that Bam might be able to do on him. I do expect to see some nice stops. I do expect to see some tough defensive possessions, but I also saw Jokic go against Anthony Davis, and they ended up putting Rui Hachimura on him for some of that series because while AD was doing what he could, that is still Nikola Jokic, and he's still gonna do what he does. Now in this series, when Gabe Vincent decides that he is Steph Curry, Jamal Murray is gonna be right there to match that and probably outdo it in most games. Sometimes against Boston, the offensive possession was as simple as Marcus Smart taking a lot of the clock to back down and get to a fadeaway. It's gonna be a lot more complex going against Jamal Murray from where he shoots, from the two-man game that he plays with Jokic, and don't let Jokic and Murray do the thing where Murray starts screening. Of course, that's not their go-to, it's more of a wrinkle. It's just one of those things that they can do late in games to create an advantage, and it's one of those wrinkles that if you switch it, you're doomed. If you don't switch it, you might give up an open shot, and you just kind of have to fight and do your best to neutralize it, and then you can't really even neutralize it. You just kind of have to choose what you're comfortable with. So obviously with the way the Nuggets just shot the ball and the way they have shot the ball, they have more than enough ways to offensively get to where they want, to be able to score enough points, to not just kind of have their offense in the mud for 5 to 7 minutes at a time. If you're looking at the Miami Heat, how do you respond to that? Well, the good thing for the Miami Heat is it appears that Heat culture actually does exist, and everyone who exists down there in the Miami Heat jersey gets an attribute boost. So if that is true, and if I guess by this point, this is just the new norm for their shooting. They had one series where it didn't hit quite the same, but so far for 2 or 3 series, the Miami Heat have been one of the best shooting teams in the league. That's happening. Well, obviously you do your best to involve Jokic in PNR action, make him be active. The Heat shooters have not needed a lot of space whatsoever to get their shots off. So Caleb Martin, anytime he has just the slightest bit of space, anywhere you're able to find that for him, you keep doing it. At this point, he is damn near a go-to option. Duncan Robinson, he really has given them an unexpected new dynamic, and it's not just his shooting. I'm sure that Denver defenders are going to want to stay attached. Maybe that opens up some cuts, maybe that opens up some lobs. And by default of the way Jimmy plays when he's on, that will open up some shots for the rest of the guys. So a lot of this kind of just depends on the Heat doing what they have done from the 3-point line. And that strategy can give any team problems in any given game. When you're shooting the ball that well, it's almost not really up to the defense what happens. So that is going to be something that's interesting to monitor. Another thing that's going to be interesting here is what Spo does with the big man situation going forward. You already know the Nuggets are essentially going to play small once Jokic is off the floor. You're going to get Jeff Green out there. I really don't think Miami is going to dig into a Cody Zeller this series, or maybe even a Kevin Love. You saw them use Haywood Highsmith in Game 7. I'm surprised he didn't get more minutes in this series, but especially against Denver, who's not going to be employing 2 big men at a time, I think you're going to see that. So those Jokic-less minutes are going to be interesting. That's where the Heat might be able to slow Denver down a little bit and bring out a couple of possessions of zone and just save a few points, possibly. That's important because a lot of the games will hinge on what Jimmy Butler does. I don't think he will. Well, first of all, in the games that he played really bad, Boston won. That's really when Boston started to get off. And so they didn't even have that grace against the Celtics for bad Jimmy games. I am very fascinated to see what type of start he has to this series. I'm sure that you're going to see Aaron Gordon on him. And then after that, like Bruce Brown, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. At this point, I feel like I've seen Jimmy at some point figure it out against any defender ever that you put in front of him. So that's just something that's going to remain to be seen. However, initially, Denver does have the defensive matchups there for him. My question is how interesting this series turns out if you just get both teams duplicating their shooting from last series. So we talked about the Denver starters pretty much all shooting 40% from 3. We talked about the Miami Heat shooting. If you get those just going against each other, that's a whole lot of shot making. That right there is why I'm not just giving up and looking at the rosters and saying, oh, this is going to be boring and Denver is just going to kill, because the Miami Heat, the thing with them is that when you talk about what should happen in a lot of these series, so far, what should happen just has not happened. They have outdone that. So that right there automatically makes me take a sweep off the table. I think the level of shot making that they have had with Caleb Martin and the other guys surrounding Jimmy Butler is going to get them some games. I do, however, think it'll be 2. I am going to pick Denver in 6 here. I just don't think that Miami will be able to survive the blitz from a Jokic and Murray, because that's a duo that just has so many ways to play off of each other and so many ways to create for themselves that I don't see where Miami is going to be able to create the advantages. And when you combine that with the fact that they've got role players that are going to blitz you on top of that, I just don't see the Heat being able to overcome it enough when Bam has 1 or 2 bad games. Like, when you've got to go against a team that has a dynamic duo like these two, it's not like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum where they just don't have a clue really how to play off of each other and how to play with each other, how to really make it a thing where it's not just your turn, my turn. To overcome that, it feels like you would need all of the good parts of what they just got in that Celtics series, and probably an even better Caleb Martin if that's possible. Now, the one wild card here is that at some point in the series, Tyler Hero is expected to make his return. That's another shooter, that's possibly some more shot creation. The only thing is, I have to go off of what I have in front of me, and we don't even know that he's actually going to return at that point. And if he does, this is going to be the first basketball he's played in a couple of months, thrown right back into the NBA Finals. So how do they reacclimate him? What type of series are the other guys having by the point that he does return? Because if everyone is blazing and then you throw Tyler Hero on top of that, things get really interesting. He can just come in and literally just be a corner shooter or a wing shooter at that point, and you might be able to do something interesting. But if you come in and guys aren't having the same type of series, if you've had a couple of bad Bam games by that point, it'll be an addition, but will it be enough to get them over the top? Going off of what we have in front of us, I just believe that Denver is going to be able to create more advantages than Miami is. Thus, I'm going to pick them in 6 games. I feel like a lot of people are picking Denver in 5 or 4, but I just witnessed the Miami Heat up in person and in front and close, so I don't believe this team is going to lay down and get swept, even if they're not as talented as the team they're going against. That's what I think about this series. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Be sure to watch the games with us on playback. We are still going to watch all of the NBA Finals, and I'm going to enjoy it because I am a basketball fan first. So once again, congratulations to Miami Heat. Hell of a series. If we manage to make it past this offseason intact, I'm sure we will see y'all again next year because we see y'all all the time. This is now since 2010. It's been a crazy rivalry, to say the least. Appreciate you all watching, and I'll see you on the next one.